We speak into the quiet, not because we are sure someone is listening, but because silence feels heavier when we carry it alone. We pray, sometimes softly, sometimes desperately, sometimes with words we learned long ago, repeated without thinking, sometimes with words we invent on the spot, trembling, unsure, unfinished. We ask for help, for healing, for clarity, for forgiveness, for something to change, or for something to stop. Then we wait, and often nothing seems to happen. No voice, no sign, no clear response, only the same silence we started with. And slowly, a question forms, not loudly, not angrily, but quietly in the back of the mind. Does God listen when we speak, or are we talking into an empty space? If you have ever prayed and felt nothing in return, this reflection is for you. If you have ever wondered whether your words reached beyond yourself, this space is for you. Not to answer you, not to convince you, but to sit with the question honestly. This channel exists for moments like this, moments where belief feels uncertain, where doubt is not an enemy but a companion, where we do not rush to conclusions, where we allow silence to remain. Because some questions are not meant to be solved, they are meant to be lived. We pray because we are human, not because we are confident. Prayer often begins where certainty ends. We speak when we do not know what else to do, when control slips away, when logic reaches its limit, when pain refuses to be ignored. Prayer is not always faith. Sometimes it is fear, sometimes it is habit, sometimes it is a last attempt to feel less alone. And still, we speak. We speak because silence without direction feels unbearable, because unanswered suffering demands a witness, because the heart needs somewhere to go when the mind has no solution. But what if the act of speaking is not the point? What if prayer is not a request sent outward, waiting for a reply to come back? What if prayer is something else entirely? Many people imagine prayer as communication, a message delivered, a response expected. We speak, God listens, God answers. But real experience rarely follows this structure. More often, prayer feels one-sided, unbalanced, incomplete. Words go out, nothing comes back. And this is where many people begin to doubt. Not because they lack belief, but because they are honest. If God listens, why does silence remain? If God cares, why does the world continue as it is? If prayer matters, why does it feel so fragile? These are not rebellious questions. They are human ones. Silence is difficult because we associate it with absence, with rejection, with being ignored. When a person does not respond, we assume disinterest. When a loved one stays quiet, we fear distance. When the world offers no explanation, we feel abandoned. So when God is silent, we translate that silence using human language. No answer means no one is there, but silence may not mean what we think it means. In many spiritual traditions, silence is not empty, it is full. Full of things that cannot be reduced to words, full of presence that does not announce itself, full of reality that does not perform. Words are easy to misunderstand. Silence is harder, but more honest. When we pray, we often focus on what we say, the right words, the correct tone, the proper posture. But prayer may not depend on language at all, it may depend on attention. Notice how prayer changes when words run out. At first we speak, then we repeat ourselves, then we pause, then we sit, and something shifts, not outside, inside. The mind slows, the body settles, breath becomes noticeable, thoughts soften, even if only slightly. In that moment, prayer stops being something we do. It becomes something we are inside of. Perhaps God does not listen in the way we imagine. Perhaps listening itself is not the right word. Listening implies distance. One speaks, another receives. But what if prayer does not cross distance at all? What if it reveals closeness? What if silence is not the absence of response, but the removal of separation? We expect answers because we expect God to function like a person, a voice, a decision maker, a responder. But human expectations shape divine silence into disappointment. What if prayer is not about changing God's mind, but about seeing our own more clearly? What if prayer is not a request for intervention, but an invitation to awareness? This does not mean prayer is useless. It means prayer may be misinterpreted. We ask for outcomes. Prayer offers insight. We ask for certainty. Prayer offers presence. We ask for explanations. Prayer offers stillness. And stillness feels unsatisfying when we want solutions. Yet stillness has a strange effect. It reveals what we carry, our fears, our hopes, our assumptions. In silence, nothing distracts us from ourselves. That can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. which is why many people stop praying when silence appears. Not because silence is empty, but because it is honest. Silence does not reassure us, it does not flatter us, it does not promise control. It simply allows reality to be seen. When Jesus withdrew into silence, it was not to escape, it was to face what could not be avoided. When he stood silent before accusation, it was not weakness, it was clarity. Silence does not argue, it does not defend, it does not explain, it stands. Prayer then may not be a conversation, it may be a mirror. We speak, and in the absence of response, we hear ourselves more clearly. We hear what truly matters, we hear what we are afraid to admit. We hear what words usually cover. This does not mean God is distant, it may mean God is closer than language allows. If God is present in silence, then speaking is not about being heard, it is about becoming aware. Aware of longing, aware of pain, aware of love. Prayer shapes the one who prays, not by giving answers, but by changing how questions are held. When we expect silence to behave like rejection, we miss its invitation. Silence invites us to listen differently, not for words, but for shifts, for subtle movements, for quiet understanding. Many people say they stopped believing because God did not answer, but perhaps belief was attached to outcomes. And perhaps prayer was never meant to guarantee outcomes. Perhaps prayer is the place where we learn to stay present without guarantees, to remain open without certainty, to sit with life as it is, not as we wish it to be. This is not comforting in the usual sense, but it is real. And reality has a way of transforming us slowly, without announcements, without signs, without noise. So does God listen when we speak. The question itself may be incomplete, because it assumes distance, it assumes separation, it assumes one voice calling out to another. What if prayer is not reaching upward, but settling inward? What if silence is not the absence of God, but the absence of illusion? And if that is true, then prayer is not about getting something. It is about seeing something, something that words cannot deliver. This is not an answer. It is an opening, a place to remain curious, a place to remain honest. If you stay with this question without rushing to resolve it, it may change the way you listen, not only in prayer, but in life. And perhaps that is enough for now. Silence hurts more than rejection. Rejection is clear. Someone says no, someone turns away, someone closes a door. Silence does none of that. Silence leaves the door open, but unmoving. No sound, no signal, no explanation, and the waiting becomes heavier than the loss. When silence appears, the mind begins to fill the space. It creates stories, assumptions, meanings that were never spoken. Maybe I am not worthy. Maybe I am not heard. Maybe there is no one there at all. Silence gives the mind too much room. We look for signs, we listen for voices, we search for direction, and when none appears, something inside us tightens. Faith becomes fragile here, not because faith is weak, but because silence touches the deepest human fear, the fear of being alone. In everyday life, silence often means distance, a message left unanswered, a call that is never returned, a room where someone used to be. So when God is silent, we interpret it the same way. Absence, not mystery, not depth. Absence, no sign, no voice, no direction. And slowly trust erodes. People rarely leave faith in moments of anger. They leave in moments of quiet disappointment. They leave after praying for too long, after hoping without result, after speaking into silence again and again. They leave not because they stopped believing, but because believing began to feel painful. Faith becomes exhausting when it demands endurance without understanding. And silence offers no explanation. Many people leave here, not loudly, not dramatically. They simply stop asking, stop waiting, stop speaking. The prayers fade first, then the rituals, then the language of belief itself. What remains is often a quiet ache, a sense that something meaningful was lost, even if it never fully made sense. And a question lingers. Did I leave God, or did God leave me? But perhaps this question is shaped by expectation. Expectation is invisible until it is disappointed. We expect God to respond the way humans respond. We expect clarity, feedback, guidance that arrives on time. When that does not happen, we feel misled. But what if faith was never a contract? What if silence is not a violation, but a condition? Silence reveals what we thought faith was supposed to provide. Security, certainty, protection from confusion. When these do not appear, silence feels like betrayal. But maybe faith was never meant to remove uncertainty. Maybe it was meant to teach us how to live within it. Silence does not explain itself. It does not defend itself. It simply remains. And this is where many people misunderstand it. Silence feels passive, inactive, like nothing is happening. But something is happening. Silence removes distractions. When answers stop arriving, attention turns inward. The mind notices its restlessness. The heart notices its hunger. The body notices its tension. Without direction, we are forced to face ourselves. This can feel like abandonment, but it can also feel like exposure. Silence exposes expectation. We expected comfort. We expected reassurance. We expected to be guided step by step. And when silence offers none of that, we feel lost. But lostness is not absence. Lostness is disorientation. And disorientation can be the beginning of a deeper seeing. When we no longer know where we are going, we may finally notice where we are. Many spiritual paths pass through silence, not as punishment, but as transition. Silence strips away borrowed beliefs, inherited answers, second-hand certainty. What remains is raw experience, fear, hope, doubt, longing. Faith without silence is often borrowed. Faith with silence becomes personal. But this process is uncomfortable, which is why many leave before it unfolds. Silence does not reward effort. It does not confirm progress. It does not validate belief. It simply asks us to stay. Stay without guarantees. Stay without explanation. Stay without the comfort of knowing. For some, this feels unbearable. They would rather leave than remain uncertain. And that choice deserves honesty, not judgment. Leaving faith is often an act of self-preservation. When silence feels like absence, stepping away can feel like relief. No more waiting, no more hoping, no more unanswered questions. But something is also lost, not God, perhaps, but the willingness to sit with mystery. Silence tests not belief, but patience. It asks whether we can remain present without resolution, whether we can allow meaning to unfold slowly, or whether we need immediate clarity to continue. Many people confuse clarity with truth, but truth does not always arrive clearly. It often arrives quietly, in fragments, in moments, in experiences that cannot be explained. Silence creates space for this kind of truth. But only if we do not flee it. When people say God was absent, they may be describing unmet expectations. They expected direction. They received uncertainty. They expected reassurance. They received stillness. They expected answers. They received questions. And they concluded that no one was listening. But perhaps the listening was happening elsewhere. Not in words, not in signs, but in the way silence shaped attention. Silence forces honesty. Without external confirmation, we must confront what we truly believe, not what we repeat, not what we inherited, but what we experience. Silence asks, what remains when there is no response? What do you trust when there is no guidance? Who are you when faith no longer performs? This is where many faith stories end, but it is also where some deepen. Not because silence disappears, but because the relationship to silence changes. Silence stops being interpreted as rejection. It becomes a teacher, not a comforting one, not a gentle one, but a truthful one. It teaches us that faith is not certainty. It teaches us that meaning is not always delivered. It teaches us that presence does not announce itself. Silence may not mean God is gone. It may mean the idea of God we were holding on to is dissolving, and that can feel like loss, because it is. But loss does not always mean absence. Sometimes it means transition, from expectation to attention, from belief to experience, from noise to listening. This does not make silence easier, but it makes it different. When silence feels like absence, we stand at a threshold. One path leads away, the other leads deeper. Neither path is wrong. But the question remains, are we leaving God, or are we leaving the version of God that matched our expectations? Silence does not answer this question. It leaves it open. And perhaps that openness is the point. Silence appears again and again in the life of Jesus, not as an accident, not as a gap in the story, but as a language that does not explain itself, a language that does not comfort easily, a language that many people overlook, because silence is hard to read. We often imagine Jesus as a teacher who speaks, who explains, who answers questions, who offers parables and clarity, and he does, but just as often he withdraws. He steps away from the crowd. He enters silence. Before any public teaching, he goes into the desert. No audience, no affirmation, no visible presence of God, only hunger, heat, isolation. The desert is not described as a place of answers, it is described as a place of testing. And testing does not come with explanations. Silence meets him there, not encouragement, not reassurance. Silence, and he stays. This matters, because silence here is not punishment. It is preparation. The desert does not give him direction. It removes distraction. It strips away noise, expectation, identity given by others. In silence, nothing confirms who he is. No voice says you are ready. No sign says proceed. Only the weight of being alone with what is real. Silence forces clarity, not clarity about the future, but clarity about presence. And Jesus does not flee it. He does not demand a response. He does not bargain. He does not perform belief. He remains. Later, silence appears again, when questions become traps, when accusations replace curiosity, when words are twisted. Jesus often responds with silence, not because he lacks wisdom, but because wisdom does not always speak. Silence refuses the game. It does not argue. It does not defend. It does not escalate. Silence exposes the intention behind the question. Those who want control receive nothing. Those who want truth must listen differently. Silence is not absence here. It is discernment. It separates curiosity from manipulation. Then there is the cross, the moment many people point to as abandonment, pain, public humiliation, powerlessness, and again silence. There is a cry, there is anguish, but there is no rescue, no thunder, no intervention, no explanation. If silence meant absence, this would be the ultimate proof. But the story does not frame it that way. Silence does not signal failure, it signals depth. This is where human expectation collapses. If God is present, why does suffering remain? If God listens, why does silence persist? These questions are not new. They echo through the cross. Silence here is not calm. It is heavy. It presses against meaning itself. And yet it is not empty. Something is unfolding that cannot be spoken. The cross reveals something uncomfortable. That presence does not guarantee protection. That love does not remove pain. That meaning does not prevent loss. Silence does not intervene. It allows reality to be fully experienced. This is difficult to accept, because we want silence to function like distance. If God were present, we assume something would change. But silence suggests something else. That presence may exist without alteration, that God may not interrupt suffering, but enter it. Silence on the cross is not withdrawal, it is participation, a participation that refuses spectacle. No explanation is offered, no reason is given. Silence asks us to sit with what we cannot resolve. And this is where many struggle. Because silence demands endurance, it does not reward belief with certainty, it does not promise understanding, it simply remains. After the cross, silence continues. Between death and resurrection, no voice, no movement, only waiting. This space is rarely discussed, but it matters, because it mirrors human experience, the space between loss and meaning, between pain and understanding, between question and insight. We often want to skip this space. We want resolution. But silence insists on staying. It holds the tension without release. Jesus does not fill silence with explanation. He does not rush the unfolding. He allows silence to do its work. What work does silence do? It dismantles expectation. It removes certainty. It forces presence. Silence teaches without instruction. It shapes without force. It reveals without argument. When Jesus speaks after silence, the words carry weight, not because they are loud, but because they emerge from stillness. Silence prepares the ground. Without silence, words become noise. This pattern repeats. Silence before action. Silence during pain. Silence after loss. Not as absence, as rhythm. The language of silence does not comfort easily. It does not reassure. It does not tell us everything will be fine. Instead, it invites us to remain, to stay present without answers, to trust without clarity. This is why silence feels threatening, because it removes control. We cannot manage silence. We cannot predict it. We cannot turn it into proof. Silence resists being used. It must be encountered. Jesus does not explain silence, he lives it, which suggests that silence is not a problem to solve, it is a reality to inhabit. When we interpret silence as abandonment, we project our need for reassurance onto it. But Jesus' silence points elsewhere. It points to a presence that does not depend on explanation, a presence that does not perform, a presence that remains even when nothing changes. This challenges the idea that faith exists to produce outcomes. Silence refuses that logic. It reveals faith as relationship, not transaction. A relationship that continues without feedback, without confirmation, without guarantees. Silence does not mean nothing is happening. It means something is happening beyond language, beyond expectation, beyond control. This does not make silence easy. It makes it honest. Silence strips away borrowed belief, inherited certainty. It leaves us with direct experience, confusion, longing, fear, and presence. Jesus does not remove this struggle, he enters it. He does not explain suffering. He stands within it, which suggests that silence is not the opposite of God. It may be the form God takes when words would mislead. If silence were absence, Jesus would avoid it. Instead, he returns to it again and again. The desert, the unanswered accusations, the cross, the waiting. Silence marks each turning point, not as failure, as depth. So perhaps silence is not abandonment. Perhaps it is a different kind of presence, one that does not speak, one that does not reassure, one that does not interfere, but remains and invites us to remain as well. The need to be answered is deeply human. It begins early. A child asks a question, looks up, waits. An answer means safety. An answer means connection. An answer means someone is there. When answers do not come, discomfort appears. We learn early that silence can mean danger. It can mean disapproval. It can mean abandonment. So we grow into adults who still wait for answers, not only from people, from life itself, from God. We want certainty. We want to know that what we are doing matters, that suffering has meaning. That loss is not random. That love is not fragile. Certainty feels like solid ground. It gives the mind something to hold. Without certainty, the mind drifts, it searches, it worries, it imagines worst possibilities. So we ask questions that point towards stability. Am I on the right path? Is this pain necessary? Will this end? Am I seen? And when silence answers none of these, unease grows. We want signs, not subtle ones, clear ones, a door opening, a sudden change. A feeling of peace that does not fade. Signs reassure us that we are not guessing. They give direction. They confirm belief. Without signs, faith feels like walking in fog. We hesitate. We doubt our steps. We wonder if we are moving at all. Signs feel like guidance from outside ourselves, and we trust them because they reduce responsibility. If a sign appears, the decision is not ours. Reassurance works the same way. We want to know we are doing enough, that we are loved, that we are forgiven. Reassurance calms the nervous system. It tells us we are safe, so we seek words that soothe. Everything will be okay. You are not alone. This has a purpose. And when silence offers none of this, anxiety rises, because silence does not comfort. It does not explain. It does not promise. It simply remains. The human need to be answered is not a weakness. It is a survival instinct. Answers reduce uncertainty. They limit threat. They organize chaos. But silence refuses to organize. Silence leaves space open. An open space makes the mind restless. When God does not answer in words, many people feel dismissed. Not intentionally, but emotionally. Because words are how humans connect. We speak, we listen, we respond. When one side remains quiet, the relationship feels uneven. And yet, silence is not nothing. It is a different medium. When words stop, attention shifts. We begin to notice what words usually cover. Tension in the body. Patterns of thought. Unspoken fear. Silence exposes the background noise we carry. This can feel like being ignored, but it may be something else. When reassurance is absent, we are forced to find stability elsewhere, not in promises, but in presence. Presence does not answer questions. It does not explain. It does not predict. It simply accompanies. But accompaniment without reassurance feels uncomfortable, because we are trained to equate care with response. If someone cares, they speak. If someone listens, they reply. If someone loves, they reassure. Silence disrupts this logic. It asks us to feel connection without confirmation, to trust without reinforcement. This is difficult, so the mind tries to fill the gap. It creates interpretations. God is distant. God is displeased. God is not listening. But these interpretations say more about our needs than about silence itself. The need to be answered often hides a deeper need. The need to feel safe. Certainty makes us feel safe. Signs make us feel guided. Reassurance makes us feel valued. Without these, vulnerability appears, and vulnerability is uncomfortable. Silence does not protect us from vulnerability. It exposes it. It leaves us face to face with uncertainty, and uncertainty feels like threat. So we push against silence. We demand meaning. We ask louder. We repeat ourselves. Sometimes we give up, not because silence is cruel, but because it does not meet our expectations. We expect answers to arrive externally. in language, in events, in outcomes. But what if the response is internal? What if silence answers by changing how we listen? When words stop, awareness begins. Not suddenly, not dramatically, slowly. We notice breath, we notice sensation, we notice the present moment. This is not reassurance. It does not say everything will be okay. It says this is what is here now, and this can feel insufficient. Because it does not remove fear, but it changes our relationship to fear. Fear becomes something observed, not something obeyed. Certainty tells us what will happen. Awareness tells us what is happening. Signs point forward. Awareness points inward. Reassurance comforts the future self. Awareness stabilizes the present one. Silence offers none of the things we ask for, but it offers something else. It offers direct contact with experience, without explanation, without interpretation, without promise. This is why silence feels like neglect, because it does not satisfy desire. It does not feed expectation. It does not respond on demand, but it responds by refusing to perform. And in that refusal, something shifts. The need to be answered softens, not disappears but loosens. We begin to tolerate not knowing. We begin to remain present without clarity. This does not happen quickly, and it does not happen easily. Many people leave before this shift occurs because the discomfort feels pointless. But the discomfort is the work. Silence is not passive. It actively removes the supports we lean on, so we can stand differently. Not on certainty, not on signs, not on reassurance, but on attention. Attention does not explain life. It allows life to be experienced. When God does not answer in words, the response may not be a message. It may be an invitation. An invitation to listen without expectation, to remain without guarantee, to live without constant reassurance. This does not mean answers are wrong. It means answers are not always the deepest response. The deepest response may be presence. Presence that does not speak. Presence that does not intervene. Presence that does not convince, but remains, and asks us to remain too. This challenges our idea of relationship. We want dialogue. Silence offers communion. Dialogue exchanges information. Communion shares being. We are comfortable with information. Being is harder. Being requires patience. Being requires stillness. Being requires trust without proof. Silence trains us in this, not gently, but honestly. So if God does not answer in words, what is the answer? Perhaps the answer is not something we hear, but something we become aware of. Perhaps the answer is not delivered, but revealed, not as certainty, not as direction, but as presence. And perhaps that presence is enough, not because it explains, but because it remains, even when questions do not stop. What if silence is the answer, not a delay, not a refusal, not a misunderstanding, but the answer itself? This idea feels unsettling at first, because answers as we understand them are supposed to resolve something. They close questions, they reduce uncertainty, they offer direction. Silence does none of that. Silence leaves the question open. It does not explain, it does not guide. So why consider silence an answer at all? Because silence does something words cannot. Silence removes illusion. Words are useful, but they are also protective. They allow us to hide behind explanations, behind beliefs, behind stories that make life feel manageable. Silence strips those away. When nothing answers back, we cannot pretend certainty exists. We cannot rely on borrowed meaning. We cannot lean on familiar phrases. In silence, illusions collapse quietly. The illusion that we understand more than we do. The illusion that control is possible. The illusion that faith guarantees clarity. Silence does not attack these illusions. It simply refuses to support them. And without support, they fall on their own. This can feel like loss, because illusions are comforting. They make uncertainty tolerable. They give structure to the unknown. But when silence removes illusion, it also removes false security. And what remains is real, unfiltered experience, unresolved emotion, unanswered longing. Silence does not replace illusion with new belief. It replaces illusion with honesty. Silence reveals fear. When words stop, fear has space to appear. Fear of being alone, fear of meaninglessness, fear that nothing is listening. Words often keep fear at a distance. We speak to distract ourselves. We explain to calm ourselves. We pray with expectations to avoid confronting uncertainty. But silence removes distraction, and fear surfaces. This is why silence feels threatening. It does not reassure us that everything will be fine. It does not tell us what will happen next. It does not promise purpose. It allows fear to be felt, not dramatized, not exaggerated, felt. And feeling fear without escape is uncomfortable, which is why many people rush to fill silence, with noise, with belief, with certainty. But silence does not harm us by revealing fear. Fear was already there. Silence simply removes the covering, and once fear is seen clearly, it changes. Not immediately, not magically, but slowly. Fear loses some of its power when it is no longer avoided. Silence gives fear nowhere to hide. It invites us to sit with it, not to fix it, not to overcome it, to notice it. Silence forces honesty. Without answers, we can no longer pretend to know. Without signs, we can no longer claim certainty. Without reassurance, we can no longer perform faith. Silence does not allow performance. It does not reward the right words. It does not respond to effort. It asks only one thing: presence. Are you willing to be here without explanation? Are you willing to remain without clarity? Are you willing to listen without expecting confirmation? This honesty can feel harsh, because it removes the safety of belief structures, but it also removes pretense. In silence, we discover what we truly trust, not what we say we trust, not what we were taught to trust, but what remains when nothing answers back. Some discover they trust fear, some discover they trust control, some discover they trust habit, and some discover something quieter: attention, stillness, awareness. Silence does not tell us what to believe. It reveals what already guides us. This is why silence feels like judgment, not because it condemns, but because it reflects. It shows us ourselves without commentary. And reflection can be uncomfortable. We prefer guidance, we prefer instruction, we prefer reassurance that we are doing it right. Silence offers none of that. It offers truth without framing, and truth without framing is raw. What if the answer was never meant to arrive from outside? What if prayer was never meant to bring information? What if the response was not something to hear, but something to experience? Silence shifts the direction of listening. Instead of listening outward for a voice, attention turns inward, not inward in a self-centered way, but inward toward direct experience, breath, sensation, awareness. This is subtle, so subtle that many people miss it, because they are listening for something dramatic, a sign, a voice, a sudden change. Silence offers none of that. It offers depth instead of drama. Depth does not announce itself. It unfolds, slowly. Silence teaches patience, not by instruction, but by necessity. There is nothing to do but stay, nothing to grasp, nothing to resolve, just presence. And presence reveals layers. The first layer is restlessness. The mind searches for something to hold. The second layer is discomfort. The body reacts to uncertainty. The third layer is fear, old, familiar, often unnamed. And beneath that, stillness. Not absence. Stillness. A sense of being without needing to define it. This stillness does not answer questions, but it changes the way questions are held. Questions soften. They lose urgency. They remain open without demanding closure. Silence does not make life easier. It makes life simpler. Not simpler in outcome. Simpler in relationship. We stop demanding answers from reality. We begin to meet reality as it is. This does not remove pain. It changes how pain is experienced. Pain becomes part of presence, not something to escape, not something to explain. Silence does not heal by removing difficulty. It heals by removing resistance. Resistance is what exhausts us. The constant need for answers, the constant search for meaning, the constant demand for reassurance. Silence interrupts this cycle. It does not say stop. It simply does not respond. And in that non-response, effort relaxes, not immediately, but eventually. The mind grows tired of asking, not because the question is solved, but because the urgency fades. And in that fading, something opens. Space. Space to feel, space to notice, space to be. What if silence is the answer? Because it returns us to listening. Not listening for words, listening for reality. Reality is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not persuade. It simply unfolds moment by moment. Silence aligns us with that unfolding. It teaches us to be present without commentary, to observe without control, to remain without certainty. This is not a comfortable answer, but it is an honest one. Silence does not protect us from life. It prepares us to meet it without illusion, without avoidance, without pretense. And perhaps that is why silence appears again and again, not as absence, but as invitation. An invitation to listen more deeply, not outward, but inward, not for meaning, but for presence. And in that deeper listening, the need for answers changes. Not because answers arrive, but because the need softens, and what remains is not certainty, but clarity, not reassurance, but steadiness, not explanation, but being. And perhaps that is enough. Listening beyond words begins quietly, not with effort, not with technique, not with a goal. It begins when something in us grows tired of asking. Tired of searching for answers, tired of waiting for confirmation, tired of needing reassurance to continue. At some point, questions lose their sharp edge, not because they are answered, but because the energy behind them softens. We stop asking out of urgency, out of fear, out of lack, and something else takes its place. Attention, not listening for God, listening with awareness. This shift is subtle, so subtle that many people miss it, because we are used to listening for content, for messages, for instructions, for meaning that arrives in words. We listen the way we listen to another person, waiting for response, for clarity, for direction. But listening beyond words is different. It does not wait for anything to arrive. It rests with what is already here. Breath, sensation, sound, stillness. At first, this feels disappointing, because nothing happens. No insight appears, no revelation arrives, no voice speaks, only the ordinary moment. And the mind reacts. This is pointless, this is empty, this is not what I was looking for. But that reaction is important, because it reveals expectation. We expect listening to produce something, a thought, a feeling, a realization. But listening beyond words does not produce, it receives, it does not add, it notices. When listening shifts from searching to noticing, silence changes. Silence is no longer a gap. It becomes a field, a space where experience unfolds, without commentary, without interpretation, without needing to be named. At first, this feels unfamiliar, because we are trained to engage through language. We think through words, we understand through explanation, we connect through speech. So when words fall away, disorientation appears. But disorientation is not emptiness, it is adjustment. Like entering a dark room. At first, nothing is visible, then slowly shapes emerge. Not because something new appears, but because the eyes adjust. Listening beyond words is like this. Nothing new is added, awareness adjusts, and what was always present becomes noticeable. The hum of existence, the quiet continuity of being. This listening does not ask questions, it does not seek answers, it simply attends, and attending changes the relationship to silence. Silence is no longer something to endure. It becomes something to inhabit, not as absence, as presence. Presence without description, presence without agenda, presence without demand. In this presence, fear still arises, thoughts still appear, feelings still move, but they are not central anymore. They pass through awareness instead of defining it. Listening beyond words does not remove difficulty, it removes fixation. We stop clinging to thoughts, stop resisting feelings, stop demanding meaning, and in that stopping, something relaxes. The need to understand everything loosens. The need to explain everything fades. Life does not become clearer in the way we expect. It becomes clear in a different way. We see more directly, without labels, without conclusions, without needing to say this means that. This kind of listening feels unfamiliar because it offers no narrative, no story, no takeaway, and yet it feels grounded, stable, quietly sufficient. This is where silence is no longer empty, not because it is filled with answers, but because it was never empty to begin with. We thought silence was empty because we were listening incorrectly. We were listening for something to arrive. When nothing arrived, we assumed nothing was there. But listening beyond words reveals that silence was full all along, full of subtle movement, full of quiet awareness, full of life unfolding moment by moment. We just were not attuned to it. This kind of listening does not belong to religion. It does not belong to belief. It does not belong to doctrine. It belongs to human experience. Anyone can enter it, not by effort, but by allowing questions to rest. When we stop asking, do we begin to see? Perhaps. But seeing here does not mean understanding. It means noticing. Noticing the present without filtering it through expectation. Noticing experience without trying to shape it. This seeing is gentle. It does not judge. It does not analyze. It does not conclude. It simply witnesses. And witnessing changes how we live. We become less reactive, less urgent, less dependent on certainty. Not because certainty arrives, but because certainty is no longer required. We can move through life without constant reassurance. We can feel without immediately interpreting. We can experience without immediately explaining. Listening beyond words trains this capacity, slowly, quietly, without instruction. It does not tell us how to live. It shows us how we are already living, where we rush, where we resist, where we cling, and where we are already at ease. This listening does not solve the mystery of God. It dissolves the need to solve it, not by denial, by intimacy. We are no longer outside asking questions toward something distant. We are inside experience itself. Listening with awareness, where the separation between listener and listened softens, where silence is no longer a wall, but a meeting place. In this meeting place, there is no conclusion, no final answer, no closing statement, only ongoing presence, which is why this is not an ending. It is an opening, a way of being, a way of listening, a way of living without demanding language to carry everything. So when the words stop, when the questions fade, when silence remains, it is no longer something to escape. It is something to stay with, not because it gives answers, but because it gives space, space to be, space to feel, space to listen beyond words. And perhaps in that listening, something essential becomes clear, not as a thought, not as a belief, but as a quiet knowing that does not need to be spoken and does not need to end.